Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about the rising tensions in Sudan, where the conflict between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces has reached a new and dangerous phase. Both sides are building up troops, preparing for fresh offensives, and as the fighting intensifies, thousands of civilians are being displaced from their homes. The situation is critical, and the world is once again watching as Sudan edges closer to a full-scale humanitarian catastrophe. The roots of this conflict go back to April 2023, when a power struggle between the two forces exploded into violence. The army, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the RSF, commanded by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, were once allies. They had jointly overthrown Sudan's former dictator and promised a democratic transition. But their alliance broke down as each side sought control over the country's future, especially over political power and key resources. Within days, Sudan's capital, Khartoum, became a war zone, and the violence quickly spread across the country. Now, more than a year later, both sides are mobilizing again. The RSF has captured large parts of Darfur, including the strategic city of El Fasher, after a prolonged siege that devastated the area. The Sudanese army, refusing to concede more ground, is retaliating with airstrikes in the Kordofan region and moving reinforcements toward potential battle zones. The troop buildup suggests that both sides are preparing for another major confrontation that could worsen an already dire humanitarian situation. For civilians, this escalation means more suffering. Each round of fighting sends new waves of people fleeing for their lives. Families are walking for days in scorching heat, carrying only what they can manage. Towns and villages are emptying out as people search for safety, but nowhere feels truly safe anymore. According to aid agencies, tens of thousands have been displaced in just the past few weeks, and millions across the country are now without stable shelter. The humanitarian crisis in Sudan is one of the worst in the world. The United Nations estimates that over 25 million people, more than half the population, need urgent assistance. Hospitals have been bombed or looted, food stocks are running low, and fuel shortages have crippled transport and electricity. In many places, even finding clean water has become nearly impossible. Children are dying from malnutrition, and disease outbreaks are spreading as health systems collapse. The war has pushed millions to the edge of famine. In Darfur and Kordofan, reports of atrocities have shocked the international community. Entire neighborhoods have been burned, civilians targeted, and aid workers attacked. Human rights groups warn of ethnic-based killings and mass graves. Survivors describe scenes of horror as armed groups loot homes and commit violence against those left behind. The destruction is not just physical but emotional, tearing apart families and entire communities. The buildup of troops by both sides raises fears of even more widespread devastation. The RSF appears determined to expand its control eastward, while the army is desperate to protect its remaining strongholds. Each side's actions are driven by the belief that military victory is still possible, but history has shown that such conflicts rarely end on the battlefield. Instead, it is civilians who pay the highest price as towns are destroyed and livelihoods vanish. The political dimension of this crisis is complex. After the fall of Omar al-Bashir's regime, Sudan was supposed to be transitioning toward democracy. Civilian groups had joined the military in a shared government, but that arrangement collapsed when the generals refused to cede power. Both the army and the RSF justified their actions as protecting Sudan's future, yet their struggle for dominance has plunged the country into chaos. Now, with the transitional government gone and civilian leaders sidelined, Sudan faces a deep political vacuum. Regional and international efforts to end the fighting have repeatedly failed. Ceasefire agreements have been signed and broken within hours. Peace talks have stalled because neither side is willing to compromise. Neighboring countries and global powers have tried to mediate, but their influence is limited. Meanwhile, some regional actors are accused of supporting one side or the other with weapons and funding, further complicating the situation. The conflict also threatens regional stability. Sudan borders 7 countries, and the flow of refugees is already straining its neighbors. Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt have seen large numbers of people crossing their borders in search of safety. The risk of the fighting spilling over into other nations is growing, especially as armed groups and militias move freely across porous frontiers. If the war continues unchecked, it could ignite wider instability in the Horn of Africa and the Sahel. The international community faces a difficult challenge. Humanitarian organizations are struggling to operate amid the violence. Aid convoys are often blocked or attacked, and workers face extreme danger. Despite repeated calls for unrestricted humanitarian access, both sides have imposed tight controls on aid delivery, using it as leverage in the war. The result is that millions remain trapped without the help they desperately need. For ordinary Sudanese people, daily life has become a battle for survival. In cities under siege, residents live under constant bombardment. Those who remain behind describe entire neighborhoods turned to rubble, hospitals overwhelmed with casualties, and markets destroyed. Families are forced to ration what little food they have, and parents go hungry so their children can eat. Schools are closed, leaving a generation of children without education or hope for the future. It is heartbreaking to see how a country that once inspired hope after the 2019 revolution has descended into such chaos. People who fought for freedom and democracy now find themselves trapped between 2 armed factions. Civil society leaders, activists, and journalists who once dreamed of rebuilding Sudan are now displaced, imprisoned, or silenced. The promise of a new Sudan has been replaced by fear and despair. The recent military buildup shows that both sides believe they can still gain the upper hand. The RSF, flush with victories in Darfur, is pushing towards central Sudan, while the army hopes to reclaim lost territory through air power and alliances with local militias. But neither side has achieved a decisive victory, and the country risks sliding into a prolonged war of attrition. Such a scenario would prolong suffering for years and make peace even harder to achieve. International organizations warn that Sudan's conflict could become the world's largest hunger crisis if the fighting continues. Crops are failing, food imports are disrupted, and inflation has made basic goods unaffordable. Families who once farmed their land now rely on aid that may never arrive. Children are the most affected, with malnutrition rates climbing sharply. Without immediate action, experts fear that famine could spread across large parts of the country. Despite the darkness, there are still stories of courage. Across Sudan, local communities are coming together to help one another. Volunteers risk their lives to deliver food and medicine to those trapped by fighting. Doctors and nurses continue to work in makeshift clinics despite shortages of supplies. Teachers are organizing informal classes for displaced children, determined to keep hope alive. These acts of solidarity show the strength and resilience of the Sudanese people, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. The world must not turn away. While attention often shifts to other global crises, what's happening in Sudan deserves urgent focus. The displacement of millions, the destruction of cities, and the suffering of civilians demand a stronger international response. Diplomatic pressure, humanitarian aid, and accountability for war crimes are all essential steps toward ending this tragedy. If the RSF and the army continue to escalate, the consequences could be catastrophic. More lives will be lost, more families displaced, and the fabric of Sudanese society could be torn beyond repair. What the country needs most is an immediate ceasefire and genuine negotiations that include civilian voices. Only through dialogue and accountability can Sudan hope to rebuild and move toward peace. As we continue to watch this crisis unfold, it's important to remember that behind every statistic are real people, families who once lived ordinary lives now struggling just to survive. They need food, safety, and hope. They need the world to pay attention and act before it's too late. Thank you for watching and for staying informed about what's happening in Sudan. Please share this video, spread awareness, and support organizations providing aid to those affected by the conflict. Every bit of attention and every small act of support can make a difference. The people of Sudan deserve peace, and they deserve to be seen and heard.